King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Then he said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means."
Let's go to God and pray. Holy and gracious God, we now come and we humble ourselves to hear your voice, God. Your word is powerful. Your word is powerful and transforming and life-giving word. We ask that you touch our lives to speak to us through these words, so we may be transformed, we may be changed, we may become better. All this we pray in your Son's name. Amen. I heard a funny story of a coach whose elder sister was being married. She just surprised him with her wedding announcement, and she asked his brother to be at the wedding, and he was a little hesitated, and he said, "Andy, you know, my coaching responsibilities go into October, and the date that you picked is the same day when our team plays a conference game. And my football team won't be able to get along without me." But he managed and he reluctantly agreed, and returning home from the out-of-town wedding, the coach bought a newspaper at the airport just to check how his team did, and he saw that his score was 55. The team won by 55-0. He was back home a few days later at practice. The coach was greeted by someone, and it goes like this: "Hey coach, isn't there any other wedding that you can go to this weekend?" You can tell that this coach was dealing with something, that he has to work on something, and that is his pride. But isn't it something that we all deal with? We all struggle with, we have to struggle with. If you're not sure that you have this problem, let me help you with a couple of examples. When you talk a lot about yourself, your accomplishments, your education, your title, your position, your financial status, That is a sign of pride. Know that it's pride. Do you know someone who has this problem? You have seen people who have, they talk about their accomplishments, they talk about their title and the position they hold and who they are. When someone asks you to do something and your immediate thought is, no, I shouldn't be doing this. This is too small for me. This is too simple for me to do it. That's pride. You heard about an opportunity announcement, church announcement, or Sunday worship bulletin, and you know that you can help, but you don't choose to, and you say, no one asked me. Well, it was in the bulletin. It was announced, but you said, no, the pastor never asked me. I was not asked individually. That's a pride. That's a sign of pride. If you consistently criticize others, it's a sign that you are a prideful person. Or if you have a problem to receive constructive feedback, constructive criticism, and you have a problem with that, it's a sign of pride. Or when a friend graciously points out a sin in your life, and you get defensive and start to justify, it's a sign of pride. Let me give you two more. I hope you might relate at least with one of these. If you can reach out to the other for help, it's a sign of pride. There are times in life when it's okay to admit that something is beyond our capacity and we need help. We can receive help from others. If you can't reach out for help, or if you can't accept the help that you are offered, it's a sign of pride. I'm a pastor. I struggle with pride all the time. My natural inclination toward taking a Sunday off is what will happen on Sunday. I think I'm in control. But God is in control. Who will hold this building if I'm not here? That is my pride. And then I have to remind myself that it's not me who is in control, it's God who is in control, it's His church. I'm just an instrument. And when I'm back next Sunday, if I take off one Sunday and I'm back next Sunday, I can hear voices in my head. The voice of someone who said to the coach, hey coach, isn't there any other wedding you can go to this weekend? And I can tell you something, when I was writing this part of my sermon, talking about my pride was in the way, hey, are you going to talk about this? Are you going to talk about your weakness? That was my pride in the way I said, I am going to talk about this, because no matter what, I'm working on this, and I'm getting better. I am better than I was. And most importantly, when it comes to the sin, I am no better than anyone else who is sitting in the pews or who are watching online. I'm no better than anyone else. Here is another one. Someone feels the need to dominate a conversation and seemingly spill everything they know without giving other people the opportunity to share. Have you seen anybody like that? Have you seen someone else doing it? And some of you are saying, yeah, someone is doing it right now. Friends, the sin of pride is as old as the human history. And today we are going to look at a story of a king with a serious problem of pride. And before I get into, have you ever heard this phrase, the writing is on the wall? Have you ever heard? This is the text of the Bible where it comes from. It comes from, this expression comes from the Bible, and this is where it comes from. You're going to look into this. This morning you're going to find out where that saying comes from. So we're talking about the king of Babylonia. A Babylonian king, at the time the writing was literally on the wall regarding the end of the kingdom of Babylon. And this is how it goes. It says the king Belshazzar gave a great banquet of 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. And when you read the book of Daniel, you know that during the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon conquered Judah and took the people captive. And Nebuchadnezzar, however, has died at this point of the biblical history, and his grandson, Belshazzar, he is now the king over Babylon. And Belshazzar is actually ruling along with his father, whose name is Nabonidus. And Nabonidus was the son-in-law of King Nebuchadnezzar. So he married the daughter of King Nebuchadnezzar. So he married one of his daughters and became the king. But he was the king of kind of king that who mostly stayed outside. He was like on most of the time he was on military expeditions, conquering more cities for Babylon. So he was mostly outside. And Belshazzar is in Babylon and ruling with his father. So the story tells us that King Belshazzar is having a banquet of thousands of his nobles. Now, what the text does not tell us in the Bible is that right now, during this banquet, where they're kind of having a drunken party, right outside the walls of Babylon, the Medes and Persians are attacking. They're having the parties, but these armies, Medes and Persians, they are right outside the city and they are attacking. Now you might think, well, doesn't Belshazzar know that they're attacking? He does. In fact, they have been out there for a long time, for at least 2.5 years. They're outside the city and they're trying to get in. They have been laying siege to the city for some time now, and Belshazzar does not believe that they have any way of breaching the walls, because remember, it's Great Babylon we are talking about. The walls of the Babylon that were kind of guarding the city, they were 350 feet high and 80 feet wide. So at least 2 to 3 chariots that were side by side that can ride on that wall. So that was that was how thick that wall was. So Belshazzar, he knew with his guard. So he was not worried at all. He said, whatever, I don't care. So while they were having this party, the Medes and Persian armies, they're right outside the city. And the Euphrates River that ran to the city, and they had constant fresh water. It was believed that if ever the city had to shut the doors to an attacking army, they can last for 20 years. So Belshazzar had no reason to worry. He had no reason to worry whatever they were doing. So Belshazzar, he is not concerned at all. He is just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. He is absolutely, totally unconcerned about it. He is so ignoring the Medes and Persian army. He is not even watching what they are doing. If he would have been watching, he would have found out something extremely fatal that the army was doing. They had begun to stop the Euphrates River and direct it toward a nearby lake so that it would become a dry riverbed. The plan is that the entire Persian army is going to walk underneath the wall of the city in a dry riverbed and just walk into the city and find an unsuspecting people. And that is exactly what the history tells us. That's exactly how it happened. But Belshazzar is oblivious to the entire situation because of his pride. Verse 2 says that while Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, means his grandfather, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. And look at this word. So the king, his nobles, his wives, and concubines might drink from those. And they drank the wine. The king ordered all those goblets and vessels brought to the king, and they drank from those goblets. idols, and they praised the gods of, not the God of Israel, not the God of heaven. They praised the God of silver, God of gold, the God of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Now, why on earth do you think Belshazzar would do such a thing? He would drink wine from sacred vessels dedicated for the temple. They were already drinking wine. Did you notice that? Why would he ask for those particular vessels and goblets that were brought from Jerusalem? Why would he ask for that? He did this to show contempt to God of heaven, to the God of the Jews. He is throwing a huge party to show contempt to Persian, Medes and Persian army, and now he shows contempt to God of heaven. And it's an extreme manifestation of his pride. And God sees this as a final rejection of himself by his king. So here's what happens in verse 5. And here is where we get the writing on the wall. While they had been drinking, suddenly fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king was watching the hand as it wrote. Then the king's face turned pale, and his thoughts terrified him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked. The king, then it says in verse 7, he summoned enchanters and astrologers and diviners and said, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck. And he will be made the third highest ruler in Babylon. Notice he said third highest ruler. First highest ruler is his father. Second highest ruler is King Belshazzar. So he is offering the third highest position to whoever could read and interpret this writing. And verse 8 goes on to say that all the king's wise men came in, all the enchanters and all those diviners came in, but none of them could read that writing on the wall. They had no idea what it was. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified. He was more terrified to it, and his face grew even more pale. And his nobles were baffled. They were perplexed. What's going on? What is this all about? And they were all sitting around and wondering what in the world this all about. And you know, the commotion, they're talking, they're trying to, do you know what is this? Do you know what is this? Who can talk? And the queen who is inside, she can hear all this commotion, and she comes to find out what's going on. And the queen is not the wife of Belshazzar. She is the wife, she is most probably his mother. She is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So she is his mother. So the queen, she comes, she has seen Daniel, what Daniel did for Nebuchadnezzar, interpreted his dreams. So she comes to the king and says, hey, let me tell you something. There is a man in your kingdom, you should call him. His name is Daniel. And he has done wonderful things when your father and your grandfather was the king. He has wisdom of God. He has intelligence. He is intelligent man. You should call him. And his understanding is also ability. He has the ability to interpret dreams, and he explains the riddles and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what this means. So Daniel brought before the king. And the king said to him, I have heard great things about you. It seems like you have some special skills, you have some special knowledge, you have some special wisdom. Even my mother, she spoke very, very highly about you. Now look at this writing on the wall. Can you explain that to me? Can you interpret what it means? And if you can, you will be the highest ruler in the kingdom. You will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be the third highest in rank in Babylon. And look at what Daniel answered, that you're going to love this response. Daniel, keep your gifts for yourself. And give your reward to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. And now Daniel starts. He said, O king, the Most High God gave your father, means Nebuchadnezzar, And don't confuse yourself when he says, well, because it's common in Bible. When it says father, it does not mean your immediate father, it can be ancestors as well. God of Abraham, my father Abraham. So that's what it means. So he says, your father Nebuchadnezzar, the sovereignty and greatness. God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness, and he had the authority to do whatever he thought was right in his eyes. God gave him this authority. But then a time came in his life when his heart became arrogant, prideful, and his heart was hardened with pride. And God hates pride. So he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people, from the community from where he lived. He driven away from the people to live with, who? The wild donkeys. So just imagine, king, the superpower of the time, Babylon, the king, when God humiliated him, had decided to humiliate him, to bring him down, he went all the way to live with wild donkeys. That was a kind of where the God can do pride people when human heart is filled with the pride. So God hates pride, and he drove him away from people who live with wild donkeys and ate grass like him. Can you imagine that? The king of the superpower living with wild donkeys and eating grass. And all that happened because of his pride, because his heart was hardened. Until, here is what I want you to pay attention. All that humiliation continued until he acknowledged that Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. So there was nothing special about Nebuchadnezzar. It was God who had set him as the king. Now here's something that I want you to pay more close attention. Now he's speaking to Belshazzar, the king. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself. Your grandfather did, but you have not humbled yourself. Though you knew all this, you have heard all this, you knew all this, but you have chosen not to humble yourself. Instead, in your pride, you showed contempt to God of heaven, the very God that your grandfather worshipped, that your grandfather gave glory, the very God you chose to bring contempt. And you drank wine from the sacred vessels from his temple, and you praised the God of silver and God of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Daniel points out Belshazzar's sin of pride, arrogance, but Belshazzar refuses to acknowledge. What kind of stupid people lived in those days, full of stupidity, full of arrogance, full of pride. But I am so glad that we do not have such people like this today. Not in Blackstone at least. And we are all still the same, aren't we? We still suffer this. We are not very different than them. Our sin speaks of our arrogance. And since Belshazzar does not submit and does not humble himself, he is going to face the judgment. And this is what this handwriting on the wall is all about. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Mene means God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to end. Tekel means you have been weighed and wanting and found wanting. And then Perez in the original language, when you say these writing on the wall, it's pasin. But Daniel uses here Perez, which is a form of the word that actually written on the wall, pasin. It means that your kingdom has already been taken away from you. It's divided. It's not that it will be. It's already done. It's over. And what's interesting about this is that while they're having this conversation, Daniel and Belshazzar, while they're having this conversation, the Medes and Persian army is literally getting into the city. That's what he's saying. It's already done. It's over. Verse 30 says that very night Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, the Babylonians, was slain. And it says that Darius the Medes took over the kingdom, exactly as Daniel has told them. Friends, the scripture tells King Belshazzar knew of God of heaven. He knew that God of heaven humbled King Nebuchadnezzar. He knew all that. He knew all that story. No excuses of not knowing the truth. He knew all that. Yet he refused to humble himself. Wise man says in the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. But we see exactly happening in this case. In the case of King Belshazzar. Belshazzar's pride and arrogance brought destruction on himself. So how does Belshazzar's story speak to you today, this morning? How does this story of pride, of arrogance, and of destruction speaks to you today? You take pride in the fact how well off you are. Maybe you think that you are self-sufficient as Babylon. Nothing can destroy you. Nothing can disturb your life. You are self-sufficient. You don't need anyone. You don't need anyone's help. Or maybe like Belshazzar, you see others less than you. You are more educated. You are more skilled. You are more resourceful. You are more spiritual. If any of these feel true to you, put the hand right on the wall. And here is the good news. We don't have to be. I'm not saying that we are as terrible as in Belshazzar. I'm not saying that. But I believe we have some things in our lives that we need to work on. When it comes to pride, when it comes to arrogance, all of us, I think, all of us have at least something in our life that we need to work on. I have my own. I believe you have yours too. So the good news is that Belshazzar used Nebuchadnezzar, but we know someone who is far greater than Nebuchadnezzar. We know Jesus, who is far greater than Nebuchadnezzar. Jesus, who has set an extreme example of humility for us to follow. And what is that example? He became, in very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place. Do you think it's an extreme example of humility that Jesus set for us? Even though he was God, but he did not, it was not something that he used for his own advantage. And he made him nothing. He limited himself to the time and space, became a child, became a servant. Can you just imagine that? We are just human beings. We are. But when it comes to become a servant, look how we think. Be honest with you. Look how we think. Look how I think. Look how all of us think. Opposite of pride is humility. When you will see others created in image of God, the way you will see others change. You will not see others less than you. The moment you make this choice, the moment you make it a part of your life, to see the person sitting next to you as the image of God, the God in whose image you are created, you will not see the other person less than you. And trust me, such humility will fill your life with happiness. And how can I say this with that confidence? With that great amount of confidence? Because Jesus has promised it. Matthew chapter 5 verse 7, Jesus said, happy are those who are humble. Happy are those who are humble. They will receive what God has promised. Who of us doesn't want to be happy? We all want to be happy. This is the secret. And this is Jesus' promise. It's not what I'm saying. It's Jesus' promise. It's the good news. So that's the good news that Jesus is giving to you today. People who are sitting here, who are joining us online, or if you're watching the sermon after some time, that's the good news that Jesus is offering to you. If you want to be happy, bring humility in your life. Be humble, as Jesus promised. So, Jesus' invitation to us this morning is, let us humble ourselves by looking each other to the person who is sitting next to you and see them as the image of God, because they're created in the image of God. Amen.